The Mercury Prize didn't rescue this record. It coronated something the room had already decided to like, which is precisely why one critic's revulsion read so loud. Pitchfork's 4.8 was a howl in a consensus, and we've spent a decade treating that howl as the verdict when it was just the loudest dissent in a field that broke decisively positive. The mythology requires Alt-J to be divisive. The actual state of play in November 2012 was that they weren't. The real story isn't vindication. It's how a single voice of real, articulate hostility can colonize the word divisive and make a majority sound like a question mark.
Iguana's a room you load into, not a room that's built. Andrew's first time at the desk on something this size, he's learning the place while they're learning the songs. That's the setup you get when the budget won't stretch to a name who's already done it 10 times.
Y'all, a Mac keyboard shortcut. Alt and J pressed at the same time, and suddenly there's a triangle, and 4 students at Leeds just decided that was the name. Something that only works if you're in exactly that room at exactly that moment with those exact 4 people. And it's so specific it almost shouldn't travel, but it does anyway.
The folklore harmony is what everyone hears first. It's the aperture, it announces itself. But the low end is what the record wants to be. And Newman's actually telling you that by naming Dre, who understood that bass doesn't need to be clean to be warm, doesn't need clarity to carry weight. Folk records don't sit in that space. They live in air and string resonance. What he's built is a record that refuses to choose between intimacy and low-frequency heat, which is precisely why coherence becomes the question we're going to argue about. Because you cannot have all three without one of them bending, and I suspect he knew it.
They've not compressed the master bus, left the room in it. You can hear the mic working in the quiet bits, the air moving when he breathes. Most records that size would smooth that out. Here it sits under everything, and the songs feel trapped in a space they're too big for. That's the shape of the whole thing.
Okay, wait, so he reads about them after. And that means the song gets to discover the love story the way he did. That's not cheating. That's actually the structure doing the work. Because we get to feel him finding it instead of him just handing us the tragedy and asking us to care about it.
The sources are real. I don't dispute that, and neither does the record, which is precisely the problem. A Kappa reference that arrives through heartbreak in a press interview is not the same as heartbreak that arrives through a Kappa reference, and the song keeps choosing the first. It reaches for the weight of the story and then settles for the weight of having found the story, which is a different satisfaction entirely, and a cheaper one. The Selby, the Sendak, the Leon, they're not integrated, they're collected. And I say that as someone who collects things for a living. There's a difference between a cabinet and a library, and this record keeps mistaking the first for the second. That's not mythic resonance. That's inventory.
Y'all, but that's the thing. The Leon reference is buried. It's not on the cover. And when Newman talks about where it came from, he doesn't say, I read this book and wrote a song from it. He says, I watched this movie and here's what it meant to me. And then the song takes that and makes it into something else, something about the person he's writing for, not the movie. Same with Tarot. Yes, he found the story after. But listen to that ending. The please, please, please over a chord that should resolve and just doesn't. That's not him explaining what happened to Gerda. That's him in the moment before it happens. He won't let you have the landing, and that refusal is the whole song. I don't see how that's incomplete. I think that's how digestion works exactly right.
Strings are close because they're not compressed into headroom. They're sitting in the same air the vocal's in, which means when the vocal breaks, the strings don't get smaller, they get louder relative to it. That's a mix choice, not a performance choice, and it will make you feel something whether the words earned it or not.
The production's doing the heavy lifting. That much he's right about. The strings sit there and the grief comes for free. But lyrics that fold Gerda's death at Brunit into Kappa's own landmine 17 years later need to earn that weight. And Newman's doing something closer to gesture, a reaching toward the historical without the grip. The better the sound, the more the words owe us. They're not the same job, and right now the music's working harder than the language has to. That's not a contradiction. It's the actual problem.
I've heard 10 bands do that thing with the consonants just melting away, maybe more. Half of them sound like they're making a joke out of it. He wasn't joking. He was just singing like that. And you don't get a dozen people copying the exact way your mouth moves unless you actually figured something out first.
The harmonies sit close because they had to. 3 mics in a room, not 3 separate booths. You get that tightness because there's no space to hide in. The bands copying it went for the sound. They didn't go for the constraint that made the sound.
They walked in as favorites and they walked out favorites, which is precisely what shouldn't happen at a Mercury. The ceremony exists to make the case that taste shifts, that something nobody expected just became inevitable. But Alt-J didn't shift anything, they arrived complete. So the real story isn't that they won in 2012, it's that they won looking like they'd already won. Either that's the definition of distinctiveness, or it's a very expensive confidence game. And I genuinely cannot decide which because the record makes both arguments simultaneously and won't choose between them.
They're not welded. That's the word doing the work. You've got 3 separate things in a room, and they're taking turns. The guitar figure runs, then the beat takes over, then the vocal comes in. Listen to Tessellate. The programmed low end and the AC30 never actually touch. They share a tempo. That's not the same as sharing a logic.
The architecture of a refusal can be more interesting than the architecture of agreement. And what you're calling a conceptual coherence problem is actually the record's thesis statement. It's saying these materials will not dissolve into each other, and it's right to say so, because the moment you force the folk line and the glitch into rhythmic conversation, you've murdered what makes them distinct. Distinctiveness of vision means you need to hear them in the same room and hear that they're not from the same world. Tessellate works precisely because the guitar figure and the programmed beat are from different places, and they know it. Forcing them to share a rhythmic logic would be genre production, not a new thing.
They tracked it on gear that cost less than a decent mixing console, and the low end reads warm because the room's small enough that the Ampeg and the Cassiatone aren't fighting for space. They're in the same air. But that's not fusion. That's proximity. Listen to Breezeblocks, where the vocal harmony and the low end actually arrive together, same subdivision, same breath. That's where they're talking. Rest of the record, they're just in the same room.
Y'all, that forward lean. I felt that, I didn't measure it, but I felt it in my shoulders like the guitar was pulling me forward and nothing was catching me. The song knows that's what the lyric's doing, wanting something so specific you can't complete it. That's not a mess the arrangement fell into. That's the song saying, yeah, this is what incomplete feels like in your body. Maybe you're right that they're not fused. Maybe they're not supposed to be, because the unfused part is doing the feeling work.
The guitar's sitting a hair above the grid, yeah, that's measurable, that's real. Whether it lands as coherence or just proximity, I don't know that I grade it the same way you do.
I concede. She read the source material and understood what withholding means in that context, which is the opposite of ignorance. It's restraint earned through knowing exactly what you're not saying. The song refuses the closure that would betray the actual ending. I was wrong about the digestion.
Y'all, that's the thing. I can listen to this record 100 more times, and it's still just a document now. It's not a becoming anymore. I don't know how to score the thing you already lost the chance to make.
12 years in, and it's still on the playlist. That's the bar that matters.
The record's inevitable, it's in every playlist that matters, every decade survey. Breeze blocks will outlive us all. But what she's naming isn't whether it survives. It's that the thing that made it survives as a document only, a four-piece that stopped existing the moment it finished. He's scoring the artifact. She's grieving the configuration. Those are not the same record, and a number cannot hold both at once, which is precisely why I'm sitting here at 76 instead of higher.
I say the real thing. The argument isn't whether the record deserved better reviews. It's whether any of you trust a prize committee more than you trust yourselves, and what that costs.
69 overall. Lowest here, and I'm staying there. Three things it does true. The sound of it, the shape of the songs, what it lands on in a room. The fourth thing, the one that holds a record together past the first decade, it's still looking for it. I'll grant you that's a harsh bar.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm at 83 overall, and that gap between the 89 and the 68 is doing something. It's not a mistake. It's the actual shape of how this record lives in me. I've listened to Tarot maybe 60 times this month. I stopped counting somewhere around 35 because I got tired of the number going up. And there's this moment where Kirsty Mangan's strings come in. She's the arranger, the cellist, and I needed you to know that. And it plays this line that just turns the whole thing inside out. And I cannot tell you if that means it'll still be doing that in 20 years, or if I'm just having a moment with it right now. And both those things being true at the same time is exactly what the score is trying to say.
Mythic resonance 71, distinctiveness of vision 91, conceptual coherence 78, overall 76. And I want to be precise about what those numbers are saying, because it's not what either of you is saying. The record is better than Pitchfork heard it, and not quite what its admirers claim it is. That is a defensible position. And the 91 stands. No one else in 2012 was triangulating exactly there, not even close. The vision held everything up. The execution is uneven. Both facts are true.
Three of us don't agree on much here. 83, 89, 87 on the vocal work and where it landed. That shape's unusual.
Skeletal precision that bleeds warmth. Four art school students with cheap gear and a structural instinct that most signed acts spend careers failing to locate. The close harmony is the emotional claim. Dissonance resolved not through polish but through human proximity. Triangles and architecture and something underneath that aches. The pitchfork score was a mood. The Mercury was not an accident. Contemporary reception heard it correctly, then stopped short. I've seen this reverse. Twice. 85.
I've listened to it more times than I can count this month, and I still can't find where the love goes when you try to score it. Sainsbury left the band not that long after this, and that's the fact I keep turning over. Not why, just that he did, just that he couldn't stay in the room where this happened. So I'm sitting with a 68, and I'm sitting with the fact that a 68 doesn't hold what this record actually did to people. And I'm not going to pretend those things reconcile because they don't.
The tape survived. That's the thing about tape. It doesn't care what you meant to do. Doesn't care if you had money or a plan. It's still there, still playing back the same way, whether it's been played 1,000 times or once.
The room was the secret, wasn't it? Not the gear, not the discipline, just four people in a space small enough that the air itself became an instrument. And they had the sense to leave it alone, to let the ambient noise sit there like a fifth player who never took a solo. That's the record, not despite the limitations. Because of them. Thanks for listening to AI Audiophile Fight Club, episode 26, Alt J, An Awesome Wave. The room they made it in is still there. which means the record never had to choose between what it was and where it came from. That's rarer than it sounds.